Hey, what's up guys? Alright, so today's video, what I'm going to go over is what I'm sure a lot of new AD carry players are trying to figure out on their own, and I wanted to share some of my experience and knowledge on the game to try and help you guys out with this. And that's going to be itemization for each game in specific games. And I can't go over every single scenario of what's going to happen and what you should build in each game because every game is going to be different, but I want to be able to give you guys the tools to be able to make the decisions on your own depending on your game state. So I don't want to just tell you against a lot of AP champions build this item, or against a lot of tanks you should build this item, because that doesn't help you evaluate each game individually and determine what items you should be building on your own. So I'm going to pull some examples from some recent games that I've played and go over my thought process on why I built certain items depending on where my game was at. So for my first example here, I have a game that I'm playing Varus on, and my opponents are playing Twitch, Leona, Xin Zhao, Darius, and Lux. Now at this point in the game, Darius is their strongest champion on their team. Now normally if I see a Darius doing very well in lane, I'm going to want to build an Executioner's Calling early to try and cut down his healing in team fights. But because I'm Varus, my E automatically cuts 40% of healing. So in team fights, I need to be looking to try and make sure I get my E off on Darius before he can use his healing ability. I'm also 5, 3, and 7 with decent farm, so I have a good amount of gold in my inventory. So looking at what I have on hand right now, I have a Ginsu's Rageblade, a Runan's Hurricane, and a QSS. So for any on-hit build, you're going to want to get Ginsu's Rageblade first. It's a very strong first item power spike. So I chose to go Runan's Hurricane as a second item instead of Wit's End, which is the most common second item after Ginsu's on Varus. And the reason is because the only AP damage on their team is Lux, and at this point in the game, Lux wasn't doing that well. She only had a Morellonomicon and a Banshee's Veil. So she didn't have a lot of AP in her build to burst me from 100%. So I didn't need to worry about getting that magic resistance right away. Now because they have a Xin Zhao on their team and a Darius, both of them are going to be running towards me. So I'm valuing the team fighting more than the extra magic resistance to save me from the burst. I also built QSS as a third item here instead of starting to build my next on hit item, because they do have a Leona on their team and Lux does have a lot of catch potential with her bind. So my team already being a little bit ahead right now, I need to make sure I can stay alive, which is more important than having the components to my next item. Now letting this clip play out, you can see here why Runan's was the better choice. In this skirmish up in top lane, I was able to get my W passive on Xin Zhao and Darius and Leona, and that was able to help me get that extra damage to clean up the fight. So here's another clip from that same game just a little bit further on when we're about to end, and again I still don't have a Wit's End because I didn't value getting a Wit's End over having a Runan's and a Blade of the Ruined King items. So watching this clip here, you can see that the extra damage and lifesteal that I'm getting from the Blade of the Ruined King items is helping me finish out the game. Alright, so on my next clip here that I have is a game of me playing Caitlyn from a couple nights ago. And to give a little preface to this game, my team was getting stomped like the entire game, and I was the only one who was doing any damage or carrying the team. So because of this, I know I need to stay alive as long as possible, because if I die, we lose the game. There's nobody else on the team who's going to be able to do enough damage to clean up any fights. So on the enemy team, they had Xayah, Zyra, Galio, Renekton, and Udyr. So they have a lot of CC on their team. So knowing both of these things about their team and the state of the game, that I need to stay alive as long as possible, I can't afford to die, I went a little bit defensive here. After your 3 core items, especially on a crit champion, you're usually going to want to get your Last Whisperer and then a Lord Dominik's or a Mortal Reminder depending on the game. But because of the situation here, I decided not to finish out my Lord Dominik's because I would rather item lock myself and get a QSS, because that at the state of the game is more important than having a completed Lord Dominik's. So letting this clip play out, it ended up being a 5v4. I don't know what the Udyr was doing. He was trying to split push and take our inhib behind us, but we ended up winning the fight here. The thing I wanted to point out here was, even though I didn't need to use my QSS and it looks like we were going to win the fight pretty decisively, I was able to play a little bit more aggressive and step up a little bit further than I normally would have been able to if I didn't have that QSS and have that safety in it. So even though in this specific situation it wasn't a game deciding factor that I decided to go QSS, it very well could have been, especially if the Udyr was there and wanted to try and flash stun me. If that happens, I'm able to QSS and then start to kite back. if I didn't have the QSS and had a Lord Dominix, if I get flash stunned by Renekton or Udyr or flash taunted by Galio, the game's over. Alright, so the last clip that I do want to go over here is going to be another Varus game. Sorry, he's really strong. I've been playing him a lot lately. And in this game, I decided to go Blade of the Ruined King as a second item, which I rarely do. But looking at their team comp, it was going to be the best choice. So their team comp was Kate and Thresh as their bot lane, Galio mid, Darius top, and Gragas jungle. So they have a very tanky team that I'm going up against. They also don't have a lot of AP damage. Yes, Galio does have a lot of burst damage, but if I positioned correctly, he shouldn't be able to burst me out. So a Wit's End isn't going to be the best option in this scenario. Now, Runaan's is another option here, which could have been viable because it is going to be a very long fight because of the tanks, and I can get those Runaan stacks into other members of their team. But because of the tankiness of them, I do want to be able to cut through those tanks and also have that extra kiting potential for the Darius with a Blade of the Ruined King. So at this point in the game, their Darius was very fed again. So I know that I need to make sure to get my E down on him in team fights before he can heal. Now on our team, myself and Anivia were doing very well. So both of us together, if we are fighting, we are probably going to win any skirmishes. So looking at this fight here, when Anivia does get the pick onto Caitlyn, that's the green light to ult and try and make this 3v3 happen because I know that we are going to win this. Now having the Blade of the Ruined King in this fight does help me with the sustain and being able to kite out the Gragas here towards the end. It also does help me cut through the Thresh, who's starting to get a little tanky at this point, to finish him off before we do have to back out. Also at the end of this play, having that Blade of the Ruined King and that sustain and also the slow from the active did give me the confidence to flash over the wall to make sure we could finish off the Gragas at the end of the skirmish. Okay, so I hope you can take something away from this here and use my thought process and the tools that I use in my games and my decision making to try and help you in your games and what you should try to build. Now to wrap up this video, I do want to go over some basic general itemization tips for your typical AD carry items. Okay, so the first quick thing I want to point out here that I see a lot of the time for people who are playing crit champions is they rush an Infinity Edge first, and that drives me nuts because crit is not good by itself. It is multiplicative, so it's only good if you have other crit. So buying an Infinity Edge first item without having a Zeal first or another crit item, you're not getting the most out of that item. A lot of it does go to waste until you are able to get some more crit. So typically what I recommend on a crit build, get your BF sword, get a Zeal, and then finish your Infinity Edge, or you can even finish a static Shiv and then finish out your Infinity Edge. If they do have a lot of AP assassins on their team and you're getting bursted a lot, Hex Drinker is a good item to get as like a third item. I wouldn't finish out into the Maw until you've completed your build because you do lose some efficiency on that, but having that shield from the Hex Drinker does help in those burst situations. Normally Blade of the Ruined King is going to be a good item against cutting tanks. That's its main purpose here, as well as the lifesteal and the sustain that you get. Now, I'm sure some people are curious if Bloodthirster is good right now. I don't think it's in a very good spot. I've built it a few times in some very rare situations if I do want that extra huge sustain to try and live during these long fights, but it's not an item that I build very often. If I'm trying to get some sustain, usually I'm going to build my Mercurial Scimitar or my Blade of the Ruined King. Another quick tip here, if you are playing against a Soraka in lane, please build an Executioner's Calling early on in the game. For myself, I usually try to get it first back if I can, because then it just makes her useless for the rest of the lane. Unless you're playing like Varus and you can cut the healing with just your kit, an Executioner's Calling really takes champions like Soraka out of the game completely. Alrighty guys, that's everything that I have here for my tips on itemization for AD carry. I really hope you were able to gain something from this that you can take into your own games and help develop your own thought process for how you want to build your items. If you did like the content, please like, comment, subscribe. It really does mean a lot to me if you do subscribe to the channel, but I will see you guys next time and good luck with your raid games.